the cover slide, Elements of Effective Reading and Writing Instruction for ELLs. And like I mentioned before, my name is Valentina Gonzalez, and I just want to welcome you all and tell you thank you for joining us this morning. I also want to give a big shout out to Carol, Salva, and Tan for organizing this virtual this morning. It is huge, and the organization has been awesome, and they are just amazing. I'm just going to tweet Sandra to see if she can see my screen. So I've been teaching for 20 years. I started in 1997. Just to give you a little background about myself, I've taught 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade in the classroom, all language arts. And after being in the classroom, I began to work as an ESL instructional support specialty teacher, serving kindergarten through 5th grade on the campus level. I left the classroom to serve as a district facilitator and work with multiple campuses, serving ESL specialty teachers, helping them with both compliance and with instruction. And after that, I decided to work as a professional development specialist for ELLs district-wide. And mostly I work with the elementary level, but actually the professional development that I present is relevant for secondary as well. And recently I've gotten into blogging and writing, and it has been so wonderful for me. I've grown so much professionally. I just love blogging, and I highly recommend it for all of you to give it a try. Just be brave, like Nancy said in her keynote, be brave and try something to stretch yourself. So I have some goals for us this morning. There's some things that I really want to target, and one of them is that I just want to go over the key elements of reading and writing instruction in an elementary classroom that serves English language learners. And some secondary classrooms are moving towards these reading and writing and instructional elements as well. So if you're a secondary teacher, you might be thinking, well, this isn't relevant to me, but perhaps it actually is. And we're also going to talk about the challenges that ELLs face in reading and writing. We're going to discuss the scaffolds that we can utilize in reading and writing instruction to meet the needs of the diverse students that are at various language proficiency levels, and how we can accommodate reading and writing workshop structure. So this right here is from Lucy Calkins' Reading and Writing Units of Study. And in my district, we utilize the Reading and Writing Units of Study from Lucy Calkins. And your district may not be using that particular program. What I believe is that, you know, the Lucy Calkins Reading and Writing model it's a structure, it's a model, and we have to make it work for our kids, not vice versa. We can't take the kids and make them work for the model. We have to take the model and make it work for the kids. So this structure is very supportive for differentiating, but it may not actually accommodate for all students. And that's our job as teachers, as either general education classroom teachers or as ESL support co-teachers. It's our job to accommodate the instruction to meet the needs of the students that we serve. So the reading and writing workshop is just one component of balanced literacy. It's just a piece of the puzzle. And you can see at the top it says reading workshop goes this way. Writing workshop goes this way too. So we begin with right here I don't know if you can see my cursor, but I'm kind of circling mini lesson. We begin with a mini lesson, which is where we do the I teach and we model that. The mini lesson takes about 10 to 15 minutes, and we're going to go over that particular piece of the puzzle in a moment. The largest part of workshop is independent reading. This is also where the teacher is going to pull small groups, and students also might partner read or write. So this could be independent reading or independent writing, depending on if you're doing reading workshop or writing workshop at the moment. And so this might be about 45 minutes of the day. And the last part is the share. And this takes about 5 to 10 minutes, but it's the closure piece of the puzzle. So we begin with a mini lesson, then we've got the independent time, where the teacher is pulling small groups, and then we've got the closure, which is the share. So there are a lot of things that good readers and writers know and do well. And I want you to think about the implications for our English language learners. Good readers and writers know directionality. They know that in English, we start from the left and move to the right when we're reading and writing. They understand uppercase and lowercase, or capital and lowercase letters. They know how to derive meaning using context clues, and they understand that some words have multiple meanings. They also have good accuracy and rate when they're reading. Their fluency is, they can read fluently, and they have good prosody or expression. If there's an exclamation mark, they know how to read that with expression, or a question mark, they can raise their voice when needed and stop when punctuation is there. They understand how to read different genres. They know that if they have a nonfiction book, like a textbook, they don't have to read from beginning to end. They can read certain chapters of that book without reading the entire book. And they can tap into their background knowledge to infer and summarize. And that's great and all, but what happens when we have an English language learner who comes to us with limited reading and writing skills in their native language? Or their directionality in their native language differs from the directionality in English, for example. How do we as educators help those students in our general education classrooms so they can also be successful in English? Our English language learners face various challenges. Look at this alphabet, for example. What kind of challenges would a child face if he or she came to the US and his or her alphabet looked like this? Notice that the letters some are similar, like the A, that's similar to our A, but there's a letter that's different between the A and the B. And the C is in a totally different spot in the alphabet than our C. And you might be thinking, does this alphabet go horizontally or vertically? And I don't see an L in this alphabet. So we may need to explicitly teach the child what an L is in English and the sound that it makes. There may need to be some explicit instruction on particular phonemes that we have in English that the child does not have in his or her native language. ELLs can face many challenges in the English language. For example, I want you to think about the word hit. The other day, I was at a professional development session, and we were discussing the multiple meanings for the word hit, and we did it in partners. So A-B partner, discuss how many meanings for the word hit you can come up with. Some partner pairs came up with only 2 meanings for the word hit, while there was one pair of participants who came up with 5 meanings for the word hit. Just imagine, the more meanings for a word a student knows, the better they can comprehend what they read, and the better they can write. We need our ELLs to be able to understand not only vocabulary, but the multiple meanings of the words we have in English. Homophones and synonyms, word order and structure of a sentence varies between different languages. Figurative language is extremely challenging for our ELLs. I remember when I taught 3rd grade several years ago, and I had a new student from Korea, and as we lined up for lunch, the kids were discussing what we were having today, and someone said turkey fingers. Well, she knew what a turkey was, and she knew what fingers were, and she was horrified that we were eating turkey fingers for lunch. Figurative language and vocabulary can be really troubling for our ELLs. Participation norms are also challenges for our ELLs because in various cultures, participation in the classroom differs. In some schools and cultures, students are not encouraged to talk and collaborate. They're encouraged to sit quietly and listen to their teacher talk while they absorb the information. If you follow my blog or if you follow me on Twitter, you might be familiar with this document. This document supports the reading workshop, and it discusses the structure, the possible challenges for ELLs, and suggestions for how we might accommodate our ELLs. So I'm going to go through some of these in the next few slides. I also have it on my blog where you can get a free download of it, as well as this is the writing one, and it's also located on the blog. So you can grab that off there later. The first component of Reader's Workshop, which I believe this is the best way for our English language learners to progress in reading and writing. I do believe workshop is the best model for that. But in a mini lesson, Reader's Workshop is not going to magically make our ELLs become better readers and writers. We have to accommodate for their language level. So we have to keep that mini lesson very short, 10 to 15 minutes max. And the best way to keep it short is don't ask questions. When we ask questions, we open up the time to expand it. It can keep going on and on forever. For our ELLs, we have to be explicit in the mini lesson. This is what I'm going to teach you. So the mini lesson has a very strict structure. And this presentation isn't about a mini lesson, so I'm not going to go deep into a mini lesson. But basically in a mini lesson, the components are, we've been working on da-da-da-da. So today I want to teach you da-da-da-da. Watch me as I da-da-da-da. Now you try da-da-da-da. Remember now and every time you da-da-da-da. So there are components you have to stick to on that mini lesson, and you must be explicit about them. During the mini lesson, you're going to create an anchor chart that's also going to be very explicit. To support your ELLs, you're going to use gestures and realia and visuals to make content comprehensible. Now, beginning and intermediate ELLs really struggle with talk. And I don't mean just when they talk, I also mean when the teacher talks too much. So if my mini lesson is just me talking at them for 15 minutes, that's too much. That's an overload of talk. I'm going to have to give them time to turn and talk to someone. And I might have to structure that turn and talk. So turn and talk to your partner about a time when you did such and such. Turn and talk to a partner about the book we read yesterday. Turn and talk to your partner about what you will write about. I'm going to have to give them visuals to support their comprehension. I might have to give my beginning and intermediate ELLs sentence stems so they can get some inertia to start talking with their partner as well. The next component is the biggest component of reading and writing workshop, but it's also the most important part. So we're going to start by conferring one-on-one to assess students while they're independently reading. And if you watched Nancy Motley's, if you watched her keynote earlier, she talked about how students need to be doing the work. This is the part where students are doing the work. So we gave them their little mini lesson. Now they're going to do their work. They're going to do their independent reading or writing. And I, the teacher, am going to confer one-on-one to assess my students so I know what kind of small groups I'm going to pull. So independent reading or writing time can look two different ways. I'm either going to walk around and confer with students, or I'm going to pull a small group because I already know what my students' needs are. Now, small groups are like the heart of the workshop. Small groups are when you really are meeting the needs of your students. And I would say that small groups benefit ELLs more than any other part of reading and writing workshop because they lower the affective filter, they lower that student and teacher ratio, and you're able to tailor instruction to all your students, not just your ELLs. There's so many things you can do during a small group. You can teach your students about phonemes if you have a group of students who needs to learn more about phonemes because they're beginner students and they've never learned about English phonemes before. You can pull a strategy group on homophones using Jennifer Saravallo's reading strategies book. You can fill in gaps when you know that there are gaps there. So while the other kids are not in the small group, they could be doing paired reading, working with partners. They could be doing repeated reading or reader's theater. They could be reading just on their own, using matched books to their reading level. I'm also big on using adapted text. And I recently learned about commonlit.org, which is an amazing website you can go to, and they have tons of adapted texts for our students. I've been very familiar with News ELA, which also has adapted text. And in our district, we purchased Reading A to Z, which also has leveled text. But I really, really believe that independent reading time, when you can pull small groups for either guided reading, strategy lessons, or work with students individually, this is a time when you're really meeting the needs of your ELLs. So independent writing works the same way. Your kids are all writing, and then you're pulling groups to either do shared writing or do guided writing, or do a strategy lesson on how to write an intro or how to elaborate. And I love Jennifer Saravallo's writing strategies book. It's amazing. And using that hierarchy of writing skills helps me to really hone in on what my students' needs are. So if you're familiar with Jennifer's book, really stick to that hierarchy of needs. For our beginning or intermediate students, using sentence stems or paragraph frames and allowing them to label and draw will benefit them most. Mentor text means I'm going to give them text, and I'm not talking about books by famous authors. I'm talking about attainable writing. I'm going to give them text that they can emulate. I want to give them a target that they can reach. So I'm not going to give them mentor texts by adult authors. I'm going to give them examples or exemplars that are attainable for their language and writing proficiency levels. I like this example of a paragraph frame for Somebody Wanted But So, because it really scaffolds students' writing. So I wanted to share that with you. This is from a teacher in my district. In both reading and writing workshop, we utilize partners. But when we utilize partners, we really want to be intentional about selecting partners. Nothing's worse than when you say, okay, boys and girls, go find a partner, and your beginner, brand new ELL is sitting there looking around and everybody has made eye contact with a partner, but your beginner ELL doesn't have a friend. They don't have a partner. We want our ELLs to feel comfortable. We want them to feel confident. We want them to feel like they belong. So we need to be intentional about selecting partners ahead of time for our students. We know what's best for them. Sometimes triads are effective, especially with beginner ELLs. We want to put them with another student who speaks the same language, but maybe has a little bit higher proficiency in English, and then with a native English speaker. I kind of think about it like, I'm not going to put my beginner ELL with a native English speaker who is at like the highest reading or writing level, because it's very similar to me, for example, who I don't run at all. I'm not a runner. So I would be like a beginner, a newcomer runner, right? You don't want to put me with the best track student in the classroom, the award-winning track student, because I will hold them back. I'm going to hinder them. I want to pair partners with people who will support one another and reciprocate, help each other to become better. So we're going to keep partnerships for an extended amount of time so they become comfortable with one another, maybe a unit of study or a grading cycle, and then we can switch partners. And the last bullet is so important. We have to teach students how to interact with their partners. We have to actually explicitly teach this. So boys and girls, you and your partner are going to sit facing one another. So your knees might be really close together, and your eyes will look at each other. And when partner A talks, partner B, your head is going to go up and down like this. This is called nodding. But your mouth is not going to open because you won't talk. And then when partner A is finished talking, B will talk. B will share. And partner A, your head is going to nod. I know it sounds funny, but we actually have to explicitly teach students how to interact with their partner. And I think the more and more students are becoming, digitally inclined and into their phones and using technology, the more important it is for us to teach them all about how to interact with people in person. It's kind of odd, but it is true. Anchor charts are a huge part of reading and writing workshop. One thing to consider is, who are the charts for? The other day, I actually saw Nancy Motley live and in person. We had her come to our district, and she made a great point. Our anchor charts are not for the highest kid in our class. They're for our struggling students. So we have to make them accessible to those struggling students. We might have to use visuals and supports, and the language has to be accessible to them. Of course, we need to make them in front of our students. They need to hear us talk about what's going on that chart and think it out loud. The real estate in our classroom is also important. Where are we putting this anchor chart? Is it going to be easily accessible to our students visually? Are they going to know where it is so they can find it? Because while I'm working with my small group, my students are going to need that anchor chart in order to read and write independently. And artifact, that means that when I'm finished, I might want to give a small copy of this anchor chart to my ELLs and other struggling students. So what I used to do is make a photocopy on half sheets of paper of my anchor chart. So I'd take a picture of it and print it to a page. And then my ELLs and my struggling students would glue this anchor chart in a spiral for their anchor chart spiral. So they could always have all the anchor charts, because the fire marshal frowns upon a room that's filled with anchor charts. At least in our district, it was frowned upon. So that brings us to if I were a fly on the wall. When I was in the classroom, I had a word wall, and it looked similar to this one, only mine was in English, and this one is not. And I want you to think about this one and reflect on whether or not this one supports language development. Probably not, right? And those of you that follow me on Twitter, you might have seen this on one of my tweets. This anchor chart, I had the best intentions by, putting up a word wall. It was organized alphabetically. I thought I was doing a good job, but it doesn't support language development. It doesn't help my students understand the meanings of these words. And so then I learned about interactive word walls from Dr. Julie Jackson. And basically, these are just huge graphic organizers. And we know that graphic organizers really help our students because they organize information in the brain. And our brain loves organized information. And look at this one. This is in the same language as the last one, but it uses some comprehensible input strategies, that organization, as well as some visuals and coloring. And I bet you can begin to infer what these words mean and the meaning of this anchor chart. So I can't see your chats right now because I've got the PowerPoint pulled up, but I'm wondering if you're understanding this. This is the types of energy, and the first column is heat. You might have been thinking first electric, but then you probably thought, well, wait, these two are not electric. And then over here, this is sound, and this is light. And then I've got some sentence stems for students to plug in the words. This is interactive because the students actually Once we learn about heat, sound, and light, the students come in and put their pictures in here, and they continue to add on to it. So when our word walls are written using organization in units rather than alphabetical and are interactive, they're more supportive. So now take a look at how much more comprehensible that is. As we're planning for instruction, even in our readers and writers workshop, we really have to be mindful of our language levels of our students. Then we look at accommodations. And we have to provide those opportunities. And I loved how Carlotta said, we swirl. We provide our students opportunities to speak, to write, to interact, to read and listen, to swirl. Thanks, Carlotta, for that. And then we select those supplementary materials. And as we do that, we gather information to monitor progress. And that's how we plan for that instruction in reading and writing workshop. So there are 3 types of scaffolds as we're looking at reading and writing workshop. As we're delivering our instruction, whether we're working in that small group or we're doing the mini lesson, whatever it is, when we're scaffolding instruction, we want to be sure that we're scaffolding verbally and procedurally before we scaffold instructionally. So that verbal scaffold is that slower speech and recasting, really thinking aloud, and that's the biggest part when we're talking about reading and writing workshop, thinking aloud the process of reading and writing. And then the procedural is those classroom structures, the routines, going from whole group in the mini lesson to small group and one-on-one during the independent time of reading and writing workshop. And then the instructional part would be using any kind of graphic organizers and story maps and exemplars for our students. So reading and writing workshop can scaffold instruction tremendously for English language learners. But we have to be mindful to release the scaffolds because not everyone needs them and they don't need them forever. If we keep them on too long, we do more harm than good. This tree will not need these scaffolds forever. And if I keep them on forever, they will grow into the trunk itself. I have one in my backyard that has it, and it's really not a pretty sight. It becomes molded into the trunk. We have to release the scaffold before it's too late. So when we accommodate for our ELLs, what we're really doing is we are leveling the playing field. We're not giving them an advantage. We're leveling the playing field. This little girl right here, she needs that water. That's what she needs right now. Just like our ELLs need grade level TEKS, they need their grade level curriculum. Our ELLs, they need that grade level curriculum. We're not going to say, oh, we'll wait till next year to give it to them. We're not going to tell this little girl, oh, you're not tall enough. Let's wait till next year when you can get that water yourself. No, we're going to accommodate and scaffold so that our students can have access to grade level curriculum now. And when they no longer need the support, then we move away. This is a document that I found really useful. It's actually from our state. It's from Texas Education Agency, and it talks about how we can linguistically accommodate based on each proficiency level. And I used it during this presentation to help me with the reading and writing and what teachers should do and how we should provide visuals and sentence frames and adapted reading. I just thought I would share it with you also. But it's an amazing document to help us be mindful about linguistically accommodating based on proficiency level. So earlier, Nancy also talked about, thinking about something that you don't do well. And I also had this in my slide, so I thought I could relate to that too. I want you to think about something you don't do well. It might be like cooking, or it might be, I don't know, just think of something you don't do well. Do you do it every day? Do you do it in front of your peers? Do you do it in front of your friends every day? Our ELLs and our struggling students come to school every day, and they're so brave because some of them are struggling with reading and writing and listening and speaking, and they come and they show up and they do it every day. Every day. And I think that's an amazing act of bravery. I heard Kylene Beers talk about this a few weeks ago, and it really stuck with me. And I wanted to share it with you too, because it was a big aha moment for me. Like I always knew, but just I never thought to myself, well, I don't come to work every day doing something I don't do well. Mostly the things I do every day, I like and I do pretty well. But some of our students come to school every day having to do something that they don't do well yet. So that's, that can be difficult. And being mindful of that really helps put things in perspective for me. I don't have a lot of time left, but I did want to share this with you. It's on my blog and you can access it. We've talked about most of these things today. And this is another tips for school leaders, how to make ELLs excel on your campus. I wanted to share with you some of the amazing resources that I love. These are just a few of them. Supporting English Language Learners in Reading Workshop is an awesome book by Lindsay Moses. Research-Based Strategies for English Language Learners, awesome. All of these books that are here are amazing. The Reading and Writing Strategies books by Jennifer Saravallo, those are great books. If you don't have them and you work at a campus and you serve ELLs, even for junior high, these books are musts. You've got to get them. So I highly, highly, highly recommend them. This is my information. I'm on Twitter. The top one is Twitter. The second one is my email. And the third one is my blog. And I just want to say thank you to those of you that are working every day in classrooms to help our ELLs and help our